Man, we are. Man, we're in chapter 5. We got 5 more. I think 5. I've kind of keeping up. I think we have about 5 more lessons to go. I think we have 13 right now so far. Today may make 14, and so we got I think 4 or 5 more. So anyway, we're getting close to finishing the book. I'm absolutely loving this book. And it today he's shifting gears. He's not speaking to us as believers. He's speaking to those who are in the church who are pretending to be believers. Now, that's not saying he's not talking to one of you here, but I don't think so. But that's what's going on. And so I just want to real quickly, in a different kind of way, just remind us about what James is trying to say here. I'll do it by just a man. Back in 2004. Jackson was like 5 years old, I think. And we made the decision that our family was going to go whitewater rafting. And so we went to the Ocoee, and all of us got in the boat. And I think Courtney was kind of the newest in the family at that time. Abby hated doing anything rough. She was protesting the whole time. She's like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. If I show you pictures of us there, she is not smiling. And so we jumped in this thing, and our guide told us, it's going to be rough, and here's what you're going to do. And you kind of wedge your toes up underneath things, and you try and stay in the boat. That's the goal, right? And we're going to go through this place called Devil's Hole, and it's going to be pretty rough. And so, man, we're doing that, and current's strong, and I'm like, I'm secure. I'm like, I'm not going to be the guy that falls out of the boat. And so we're cruising down that thing. We hit that Devil's Hole, and it tosses and turns us. And I see Courtney begin to flip out. And so I reach and I grab the back of her and pull her back in, and I end up falling out. I'm like, this has to happen to me, right? It's got to be me. And so they tell you that when you do that, you pull your knees up so you don't bang against the rocks. Well, what they don't tell you is that water is so swift, you got to. It's a fight just to get the knees up. So I used to have a scar. I don't know if it's still there or not, from when I slammed my shin into that rock. And here's what I realized, man. That's a lot like life. We are rafting down a world gone wrong, right? I mean, you and I are trying to live upstream in a downstream world, and that's where we are. And so the whole world is rapidly rushing toward death and toward literally the devil's hole in that sense, right? And so I think about that because I think about, man, this is what James is saying. We've called this living out loud. We've called this idea the fact that he's squeezing hypocrisy out of us. That he wants you and me to live a different life. And we do see things differently. We handle trials differently than the world does. If you're a Christian here, Christ follower, and trials are coming, you know that a sovereign God allowed that into your life, and he's doing it to conform you, right? It may feel like a deficit, but he will turn that into an asset. Now, lest we get theology a little messed up where we talk in terms of that God will turn our deficits into assets, right? God causes all things to work together for good to those that love God. Good doesn't always feel like happy good. Good feels like conformity. Good feels like what happens after a hard workout where you know, man, you're worn out, but you know that that your body is beginning to advance and grow, and it's painful, but there's something happening. That's called conformity, and that's what he says in verse 29. And so this is what he's doing. And so we see trials differently. Listen, we don't react the way the world reacts. This is what he's saying. Come on. Trials are coming. Quit being a victim. Quit whining about life. You know something. You know that God is doing this and allow this to happen, and he will use that to bring conformity in your life. And come on, we handle temptation different than the world. The world, man, they just jump after one shiny thing after the other. They get caught up in that bait of Satan in the fishing world, and it's always messed up. But not you and me. We don't do that. And we handle all of these things differently. And we see the disadvantaged. And we don't take advantage of them. And we don't play favorites. And when we say we believe something, you actually can see it because we work it out, right? We see those things. Now, today, James is angry. And he comes in here, and you're going to hear it, and we're going to talk about it. And so he's not really speaking to the Christ followers. He's speaking to the wealthy fakers, right? Man, in biblical days, it seemed like there was a void of the middle class. You had the rich and you had the poor. And that was kind of what was going on. And so as much as there should be an equality, there wasn't. And the rich were always exploiting the poor. And so this is what he's writing in the middle of that. Listen, persecution had just taken place. And they've been scattered. That's why James says this to the 12 tribes scattered abroad, right? Persecution came and they left Jerusalem. They scattered everywhere. So he's writing a letter. He's a good pastor who was pastoring the church of Jerusalem. To those who had scattered from that place, he was writing this letter, and it was being circulated among all of where the groups of people were that he spoke. And so this is where we find ourselves. So there were some people in the church who thought that they could buy influence and power in the church. And so they would join the church. We see that today. You see people that creep into different churches full of money and think that they can control things. I remember I was pastoring church early on, and they weren't happy with the music. And I'm that guy that doesn't really get into music. I mean, I'm not going to make decisions for the worship leader. Whatever he does, he does. And guy came in, want to talk to me, sits down, and says, "There's a lot of us, and we give a pretty good bit to the church, but we don't like what's happening with the music." And that's when I can appreciate that. But that's not really my area. The Lord's given us a worship leader, and I'll let them make that call. And that don't matter to me about the money or all. We're just going to follow that. And it didn't go so well it did for me. He left. They left. But I think, man, those are that's just wrong. You can't come in and influence things by money and other things. And this is what was happening here. And these are words of condemnation that we're going to hear today. And he's talking, and man, Jesus and James give their harshest criticism to false teachers and false influencers, right? Those who want to influence others. So, yeah, if you're ready for that, I just kind of set us up. Let's just look at it. It's probably going to be a fairly quick study today because it's blasting kind of stuff. He says this, "Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because of the misery that is coming upon you. Your wealth is rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in these last days. Look, the wages you failed to pay workmen who mowed your fields are crying out against you. The cries of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. You have lived on earth in luxury and indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you." And so this is his big slam. Now you're going, ooh, okay, so what does that mean for me? Well, let's have that conversation. Let me just tell you what we want to avoid. This is the best way of doing it. Listen, they had made the mistake. This is in the first 3 verses. It says this: "You stored treasure on earth instead of treasure in heaven." That's his point. Hey, listen, you've been hoarding a bunch of stuff, right? Now, that sounds a lot like Jesus, doesn't it? When he says you can't serve both God and mammon. You must choose. Treasure up for yourselves treasures in heaven, or either moth or rust can destroy, right? And so we know what this is like. And so what does that mean, right? I mean, I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, I just asked you a question: where are you in the hoarding scheme of things, right? And so none of it is all like, I mean, some of us are hoarders, right? Some of us have like storage units, and then another storage unit. We got closets, and we got, all. I'm not necessarily speaking about that, but it does happen, doesn't it? I mean, man, it took me about 6 days to unload a storage unit the other day. Most of it was like, stuff that had belonged to the church, and we had like a literal building, but still, it was a ton of stuff that we've been keeping in the storage unit. I'm like, I'm going to get rid of this stuff. And because we're not paying that storage rent, I want to get out of that. But it took me about 5 days of like truckloads of stuff to get that stuff out. So it made me think, man, do we really need all this stuff? And you start looking around and you start seeing things like that. And he says, listen, man, this all of this stuff you don't get to take with you. I know it's a sappy little story, but you never see a U-Haul behind a hearse, right? You don't get that. Solomon says it like this: man, I earn, I build, I save, and I give it to my kids who didn't earn or build or save, and they're just going to waste it. He said that's the vanity of life, right? And so this is what he's speaking about, right? And he says this: listen, misery is coming. It's coming against you in your judgment because you're doing these things. Listen to what he says: in these last days. Now, let's just kind of think about that, because I was telling Tam, I said, it's not like we're a wealthy church, but from a kingdom perspective, I mean, from a worldly perspective, we're if you ate today and you had a bed to sleep in, you're in one of the top 1% in the world. I've got a missionary friend. He's Indian, lives in Goa. His whole monthly income, bills, and everything could be satisfied for around $200. So you think, man, it's not a lot of money. I feel pretty wealthy compared to that standard of living kind of a thing. And so we look at this, and he says this, man, right? You've stored up treasures on earth instead of treasures in heaven. So we just have to ask ourselves, are we being good stewards of what God's given to us in some sense? So I told Tam this week, I've been studying this week and all of this, and my role at Tracery, being Chief Culture Officer, has shifted gears in a lot of ways. But I was telling her, I said, in light of that, I said, I think I want to create a store at the company where guys can bring in all of their pants that don't fit anymore, they're tired of hoping that they're going to lose weight and grow into them. Grow out, whatever. That we just bring it. And the same thing that we would do in church. Why can't you do that in a company? Why can't I put some canned goods in there and have a food pantry? So if a guy is hungry today and he didn't bring a lunch, you've got to go, pay whatever you pay to go get some fast food stuff. He can grab something out of that, and we just kind of get along. And I think this seems like something that Jesus would want to happen. I guess I'm asking you and me, let's look at this, because he does care about what we do with our money. Do you understand? He speaks about that a lot. So I think each of us has to take a time and go, hey, am I storing up stuff needlessly here? Right? Are there things that other people need, but I'm keeping because I may need it one day? What does that say about our trusted God, really, in some sense? And so, I'm not advocating for us to sell everything and just become impoverished people. I'm just simply saying, where is it that we can see this principle? Because he is black. Let me read it one more time, the first 3 verses. Now listen, you rich people, weep and wail because your misery is coming upon you. Your wealth has rotted, and moths have eaten your clothes. Your gold and silver are corroded. Their corrosion will testify against you and eat your flesh like fire. You have hoarded wealth in these last days. You know hard times are here. And instead of helping your brother out, you've just decided to hoard. And so I think it just gives us good pause to go, hey, where can I fix this in my own life? Because if we're going to squeeze the hypocrisy out, it has to be this. We can't pretend to have given our life to the Lord without giving our possessions as well. It's a package deal. He owns all of them. And so I just think it's good that you and I should think through that process as we work through this. So that's the first one, man. Hey, don't store up treasure on earth. Put it in heaven. That was their blight. He says, your misery is coming. That's a warning. That's a warning to them. You and me have escaped that wrath and that judgment of God, but he still is grieved when we don't do the things that we ought to do with what the resources that he's given to us. The second thing is they're cheating their servers. Look what he says in verse 4. Look, the wages you failed to pay the workmen who mowed your fields and cried out against you, right? The cry of the harvesters have reached the ears of the Lord Almighty. Wow, this is powerful, right? Your treatment of others is seen by God. Who are you exploiting in that sense? Who do you know that has needs? And maybe you pacified yourself by going, well, they just need to learn how to be better stewards of their money. Well, I'm grateful when I was trying to figure out stewardship that I had people who weren't waiting on me to figure it out. There were people who came along and gave us cars and gave us money and gave us food and helped meet our need. And I'm deeply appreciative of those people, right? This is what we're called to do, and this is what he's saying here. Listen, so not all of us have employees that we have to. I do at this point in my life, but a lot of us don't. But we do know people who have needs. We do know people that we kind of exploit, right? We know that I can pay the kid less money to cut. We cut our own grass here, but you know what I'm saying. Not pay the kid less money to cut grass because he's just a kid. I may have to pay that guy more. And we start figuring things out. Well, why do we do things like that? Why can't we just be people of generosity, right? We do know that if I take care of others, God will take care of me, right? We know that. Yeah, and if I'm generous, there's never a time I'm going to reach into my wallet, give some money, and then there's another need, and I reach in, and there's nothing there. That's a promise out of 2 Corinthians 9. I don't know if you know that or not. It's a promise. And so it's there. It's there for us. And so it's important that how we treat the waitress and all of those things, right? I know everybody now is big on. It gets annoying, right? You go into a place and they just flip that little iPad over and it says, how much you want to leave for a tip. I'm like, you didn't do anything but take my order, and so it's like we're all trying to figure out that stuff. But man, when there's a lady coming up and she's serving you and she's taking care of you, and you're at a restaurant and they're doing that, I'm always trying mindful to find out what their name is, kind of what they do. If you go to one of those places where they have that little thing that they always write stuff in, and you ask them, hey, you got any kids? They're going to show you a picture of their kid in the back of that thing, because most of them are working so that they can take care of their kids. Why would we know that, see that, and then just go, well, they were lousy service, so I'm not tipping them? Why don't we just be gracious, generous people? I don't want to be that guy that gives that little, looks like a dollar bill, but it's really a tract, or whatever. Please, can we have y'all? That's so ancient days, but please don't do that. Don't write notes on the bottom of it. You really stink at this, and so here's your tip, kind of thing. Those are silly things. Let's just be generous people. This is what He's called us to. And He says this in verse 5. You have lived on earth in luxury and self-indulgence. You have fattened yourselves in the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered innocent men who were not opposing you. You've been a glutton and arrogantly condemning. You understand the process of fattening, right, for slaughter? That's what they would do to the cows when they were getting ready to slaughter them. They'd fatten them up. He said, you're doing that to yourself. You're going to the slaughter and you're fattening yourselves up. He goes, why are you even doing that? This is silly, he says. And it's on the day of slaughter. You have condemned and murdered innocent people. You murdered people by not taking care of them, by not giving them what they needed. This is what He's called us to. See, you and me and our resources were put on this earth to serve. That's what we're here for, right? I'm not here to hoard up so that my kids can be lazy and slovenly down the road. Not that they have to worry about that, because we didn't. But you know what I mean? That's they're going to get bills. That's what they're going to get. But in that whole process, we have to think through this thing. I have been called to serve the living God with my life. And so He's saying to these people, you're in church, yet you're stinking, filthy, rich, and you're just pretending to be that. And so it comes down to this. So what are we? Are we really the church? Or are we not? Man, it brought up in my mind the memory of Isaiah 58. I'm going to take some time and just read some truth to us today. I think it's important that we do it in light of what we're looking at. Listen to what he says. This is, shout it aloud. Do not hold back. Raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion. This is Isaiah sounding a lot like James, or James sounding a lot like Isaiah. And to the house of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out. They seem eager to know my ways, as if they were a nation that does what is right and has not forsaken the commands of its God. They ask me for just decisions, and they seem eager for God to come near them. Why have we fasted, they say, and you've not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves, and you've not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting, you do as you please. You exploit your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is this the kind of fast you think I want? Only a day for a man to humble himself? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed, for lying on sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast? A day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the kind of fast that I've chosen? This is where we should pay attention. To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and to break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry, and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe him, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth in the dawn, and then your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, Here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing fingers and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like well-watered gardens, like a spring whose water never fails. Maybe it doesn't feel like you're getting ahead because of this passage like this, right? That we start taking care of other people. This week, we had a great privilege. We had a kid started working for us. He worked for us back in 2014, I guess. Struggled with addiction, moved off. Money's never been an issue. He can make money here and there. But he really wanted to come clean, came to Christ, started working for us back in December, and had just a weak moment. Got in trouble, had to go back to rehab, lost his place to stay. Just came back this week, and I don't know if you know what it's like to be poor in some ways, but a lot of people, the one factor that can propel someone faster than anything else is to have a driver's license. Without a driver's license, you can't really do much. You can drive without it, and you can do those things. But I mean, as far as it comes to work, it's hard for me to hire a guy that doesn't have a license. I've got a guy right now. He uses, I think it's $2, maybe, I don't know, for a week or to get to work, whatever he does. But he's got one of those little mopeds that you rent downtown. The little scooters. And I see him kind of coming to work, but he's working, right? He doesn't have a license, but he's getting to work, and we're paying him some pretty good money, more than he'd make a lot of places. But back to the other story. So when you don't have a license, fines usually come with it. And so fines, the way the government works is you could owe $200. You didn't pay it this week, so now it's $280, right? It just keeps building. They never let you out from underneath it. I've got friends who've been in that realm forever. And so we went up to court with him, which was up in North Alabama, paid the fine, dared to stand by his side to say we vouch for this guy's deal. And he walks out, no debt, and the ability to get a driver's license. That makes me so happy to work at the company that I work for that says we're going to do those things for you. I'm not bragging about my company, but I sort of am, because it feels like the way church ought to be. It feels like the way we all ought to be. And I'm looking at some people that are good and giving folk, so I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying, I guess like Paul says, can we excel still more in that stuff, right? Can we figure it out? This is what God wants for the church. This is why I think I remember my parents ranting and raving, and Tammy's parents ranting and raving because churches wanted to spend money on silly, needless things. It's like, why would you spend? And their answer is, well, but if one person came to know the Lord, yeah, but you just spent all this money needlessly when we got people all around us we could be taken care of, but you did that with it, right? That's the issue. Now, let me leave you with this. Psalm 61. It's a good one. Jesus quoted this one, so I'm just going to read it and then we'll be done. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from prisoners, or darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn, to revive for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor. Man, that's good. Listen, there's a lot of people who just need a little bit to get along. You can change a life, literally, with just a few dollars. Just a few dollars. You can change it. I just want us to be mindful of that, because this is what James was chastising the wealthy for, because he knew he had a congregation of people who had lost their businesses, lost their family. They'd been disowned. You realize that, right? They came to Christ, and the rest of their family was Jewish and believed that Jesus was not the Messiah. So they decided that if you did that, they wouldn't shop in your shop. They would disown you from their family. It was some sort of punishment that was going on. And so you've got that, and you got people who come in pretending to be wealthy, and they see all this deterioration going on, and they don't even try to fix it. So this is what is wrong with that aspect of things. And so by virtue of that, man, I just want